We're able to create harmoniously and unapologetic. Because you're not trying to derive your sense of self from people. If people don't like it, well, that's fine. If you do it from a true state, the odds are for you. It's a very big possibility that people are actually going to like your work. But it's because the artwork turns into a mirror, so people are looking at themselves through your work. They're not looking at the art, they're looking at themselves. Just like it becomes a mirror. A true art piece becomes a mirror to the soul, to whoever's looking at it. It's a nest. I call it a nest for the brain. Right? It's a nest. It's where your brain rests. Every place where your brain rests, we call that love. Right? Any place where the brain rests. If your brain rests, your brain you're a baby, right? A baby's crying, and then the mother holds the baby and puts them close to their heart, and then the baby starts resting and the baby falls asleep. It's resting, right? The mother's arms are that. True love is where people rest. True people rest there. An art, true love, right? Not the concept idea of love, but the true love is where people rest. Human beings rest in true love. A flower. If you look at a flower long enough, I think the Buddha had spoken about that too. And I'm not Buddhist, guys. Okay, so I don't want people to get this idea. I'm not religious, but the Buddha talked about that too. If you look at a flower, right, the sermon of the flower, the famous sermon of the flower, you can rest there too. Or even Jesus. For a lot of people that like to talk about Jesus and whatnot, it spoke about, if you want to find me, just lift a rock or anywhere, right? Because anything, especially natural thing, becomes a bridge, right? Becomes a bridge to the soul. And so this is why a lot of people love paintings by Monet, because Monet painted them from that place. And why do I know this? Because he left things saying about that. He said, when you're painting something, don't call it. When you're painting a tree, don't call it a tree. That is something that later on pops up, right? It pops up later on, but a lot of people miss it. They miss the magic of what Monet was talking about. If you're painting a tree, he said, don't call it. In other words, he was saying, lose the identification and the conceptual imagery of a tree, so that you can actually see it and reflect your mirror, be as a mirror, reflect your soul in it. That is something that later on someone named Jiddu Krishnamurti said, if you teach the child the word bird, the child will stop looking at the bird. The child will now look at the concept of the bird, but no longer will see the bird. And Monet was painting from that place, and this is why we see the water lilies and we lose our breath, right? Many of us, we see the water, the ones that are ones that are blessed enough to see it, right? And we lose our breath. You see the water, especially his older work, right? When he was older, he's because that work, I think it was Cézanne who said, many of us start out as painters and end up as monks. In other words, they awaken, right? That's what he was saying. Many of us start as painters because we use painting as a bridge to painting becomes an alchemy that burns our pains. This is why a lot of artists that have emotional suffering use painting, because painting becomes alchemy. You're turning base material, raw material, into precious metal. You're turning it into gold. In other words, you're turning your pain, your suffering, into joy. And so a true artist is a bit of an alchemist. And so this is why when we see paintings by Monet or any artist who's truly painting, and truly painting does not mean applying paint on a canvas. It means not thinking while you're painting. Not thinking, especially not thinking about your painting. Because if you think about it, you judge it. And if you judge it, you learn to hate it. Anything you judge, you will learn to hate. Because it will not meet the constructed idea you have of it. You will not meet it. Who has ever met the ideas in their mind? It's impossible. It's a big mind fuck. You can never meet the ideas in your mind. Oh, I wish my son would have been a doctor. Nope, he's an artist. Sorry, you cannot meet the idea. Oh, I wish I would look younger. Nope. It's a mental construct. I'm sorry, you cannot look younger. You will look your age. And as time goes by, you will age even more and look older. It's okay. No need to feel bad. It is life itself, right? And so nothing fits the construct, the mental construct. Natural Wool Knits says, at my last class, the teacher said not a good idea to paint from my mind. I should have a photo or something. Looks like you're using your imagination. Yeah, I mean, you can use a photo, you can use anything. I've done this enough times where I've used sketches, I've used so many things, and I just kind of construct from imagination. I also use references. I use a lot of sketches. And so I have thousands of them that I used throughout the years, and I continue to use. And so a lot of my stuff is using my imagination from a creative point, not from a conceptual point. So you can use your imagination, right? But from a creative stance, like. You can use a photograph, a sitter. Someone can sit in front of you if you're painting a portrait, or you can go out and paint and watch nature, like Monet and the Impressionists did that a lot. You can do that, but you're not relying on it. This is why we have the Impressionists. They were one of the first. I personally, I don't know if other people notice this, but I personally call them the first awakened painters. You know, at least when they were painting, they were awake, because they completely changed our idea of painting, because they no longer relied on concepts. They were acting as almost scientists, right? Observation, right? Is the root of science. Observation. So they're just observing light, and they're observing, but they're not forming concepts. They wanted to eradicate all the concepts of the centuries before them. So when they went out and painted, yes, they were using reference. The natural world was the reference, but not from a conceptual perspective, but from observation. It is very different. Conceptual means that you're thinking about it. Observation means you're looking at it and not thinking about it. Right? It's awareness, right? You're looking at it, but you don't have an idea of it, a thought. So you're able to truly be creative, because you don't have a label on it. You don't say, oh, the water is blue, right? You don't say, oh, the sky is orange or whatever, right? You don't have a concept. You look and you paint. If you're looking at something and in your mind you say that is not the way it looks, or that is not the way it is, right? It should be this way, because the idea of a tree is that the tree should look like this. Then you're no longer looking at the tree. You're trapped in your concept of what a tree should look like. It's very much like relationships, right? Why don't you behave the way I thought you were going to behave? We had an agreement. You were supposed to behave this way. Why are you behaving differently than how I thought you were going to behave? And so the agreement gets shattered, right? Because we had an agreement. It's very much like relationships, whether it's friendships or romantic relationships is the same way. The moment that you are tied to your concept of what the person is, you no longer see the person. Now you're seeing the concept of the person, and you get lost. You get completely lost, and the relationship suffers. In the same way a painting suffers, or the painter suffers. The painting doesn't really suffer, but the painter suffers because the painter cannot meet that concept. There's a concept in my mind I cannot put into the canvas, and so the painter suffers. Whether it be a loose painting, an impasto painting, lots of texture, whatever it is, right? A realist painter, it doesn't matter what it is. It's a concept. A very abstract painting. I imagine an abstract painting and I just can't put it on my canvas. It's not working. That's a concept. It's a mental construct that you're fighting, and you cannot attain it. And if you cannot attain it, well, it's the same way as if you take a toy from a toddler, right? It feels like you're taking something more true than a toy. You're taking something more meaningful than just a toy. If you take a toy from an older person, also